I want to ask you guys something. Are you excited to see Tulsi or what? Is that all you got? So, what are you going to do when Tulsi walks through those doors? Tulsi! 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 Did you hear that? No. Can you do it again? Pretend I'm Tulsi? I think you really do. Come on, give it to me. I want to hear it. That's what I want to hear when Tulsi comes out. So right now, I'm going to introduce somebody who's going to introduce Tulsi. Both these sisters are very near and dear to my heart, and they're both badasses. They're both fighters for peace and love. And so give it up for Fernando, Tulsi's sister!
Last night in New Hampshire. I'm still getting used to it, but I figure I've known her for 35 years. I live with her. Who better to tell you who she is and what's in her heart but me? One of the days she might regret this, I don't know. I mean, really what this election comes down to is picking the person that's going to fight for you. At the end of the day, who is going to fight for you? It's easy to do that when the decision is easy, when it's popular, but when it comes down to the tough choices of my political career or fighting for the people, what is this person going to choose?
The people!
So I know I may be biased, but I can tell you she has chosen you every single time. And this is all factual, this is not just me because I'm her sister and I love her. This is factual stuff you can verify. But since even from when she was 21 years old, her political career, she was elected into the state house, her unit got deployed. Does she stay in office and further her political career, or does she serve and get deployed with her unit? She volunteered, stepped down from office, and she served. In 2016, all the newspapers were saying she's the rising star of the Democratic Party. She's the new vice chair of the DNC. All the articles in the media were saying positive things about her. She stepped down from that position in the DNC to support Bernie Sanders. Another example, I can't tell you how many times the experts have told her her political career is over. That is political suicide. She has heard that her entire life. A few years ago, she decided to stop taking PAC money. never be able to run for higher office because of this corrupt system that we have that they think you need lobbyists to win. But she was there fighting for you, so she doesn't listen to what the experts say, because she's there to fight for you guys. And so this confuses people because you don't see very many politicians who do this. So we have meetings, you see articles that come out, and they're like, what is her true intention? Like, I think she wants a gig on Fox News. I'll just hold it closer to my mouth. How's that? Is that better? Oh, there we go. No, so these articles are actually saying, like, what does she really want? Why is she really in this race? Because it is impossible for them to even understand that she's actually in it to serve. So she's not taking the politically easy route. She's standing up and fighting for the people when it's the hardest. And so I laugh when I see those, but it's unfortunate how cynical people are. And so just to give you a little bit of background of who she is and how she was shaped from when we were young kids, and I am so fortunate for our upbringing. When we were young kids, our parents raised us never that success was having a big house or a fancy car, or, they never said you have to go to college, you have to do this because this is what success is. They said to us, you choose whatever path you want to choose and use that to serve God and serve other people. And the second thing they said is, if you see a problem, do something about it. Don't complain about it. Do something about it. We have something we call in Hawaii, we call it kuleana. And it's hard to explain, but it's like your responsibility in the world and your community on the planet is your passion and your responsibility. And so their push was always, whatever path it is, do it in service to others. Because it's not about us. And so she started a nonprofit organization. She cared about the environment. She started a nonprofit organization when she was 16 years old called Healthy Hawaii Coalition. This was a issue, the environment was something that she's always cared about, something that got her into politics to begin with. But this path is always surprising for us because when we were little, so there are 5 of us, we have 3 older brothers, she's the 4th and I'm the youngest. And growing up, she's by nature an introvert, but when we were little, she was painfully shy. Like, she wouldn't even answer the phone because she didn't know who was calling at our house. And when we went to the grocery store, she would make me talk to the clerk or to find out where something is. This is how shy she was terrified. So how do you get from that person to somebody who's running for president of the United States? She understood it wasn't about her, so the fear was real. When she ran for state house when she was 21, and she had to go knock on doors in her community, that's not always fun even if you're an extrovert. You don't know how they're going to be on the other side when they open that door. Imagine somebody who is painfully shy, sitting in the car, trying to build up the courage to knock on that stranger's door. And what got her through that and every other obstacle has been, it's not about me. I'm not doing this for me. It doesn't matter what they think about me. I'm here to fight for the people. And that's all that really matters. And that's how you get from there to every decision that she's made. So from the state house, she has served on the city council, she served in Congress, the decisions she made in the military. It is always in this place of how can I best be of service? And you'll see that in her life. Another thing I get, or that people say that I think is pretty funny, is how is she going to stand up against Donald Trump? Like, if they're on the debate stage, like, how is she going to, can she handle him? And that, like, makes me laugh, right? Because she's a badass. I don't know if you, like, she's a soldier and she's a badass. And I don't know if you've seen interviews that she's been in that have not been the most fair, just put it politely, and how calm and cool and collected she is. Because you can... I'll just say she's been through a lot where, like, Donald Trump doesn't have a chance. Because all the, when they do these personal attacks, again, it's not about her. It's not about, she doesn't have an ego where it's like, oh my gosh, they're attacking me. It's really, her focus is always where you, like, keep it coming. I am fighting. I know why I'm here and I know why I'm in this fight. It is for you. Her life has shown just that. And so as you consider the field of if you haven't decided of who you want to vote for, look at their lives. Not just what they're planning now and their proposals now, but what have they done for their entire lives? I'm glad today I got a little bit of time to share with you what I've seen my whole life and what a role model she has been for me. And so I'm very proud today to introduce you to my sister and the future President of the United States.
I love you too. It's so good to be here. Thank you all for making the time to come out tonight. It's good to be back in Los Angeles. See some familiar faces, welcome a whole lot of new ones. I'm pumped up. I'm glad to hear you are too. And you wouldn't know it if all you did was live in a little hole or a bubble and watch cable news or scroll through Twitter, right? It's a whole different world that sadly is so deeply disconnected with our world, the world where the people live. I feel a little sad for those people who live in that bubble because they are missing out. They are missing out and they are not feeling the energy, feeling the heart-to-heart connections that we have here in rooms like this that are taking place all around this country. They are missing out on the heartbeat of our country and what is driving us. What is giving us this inspiration and this motivation that even in these challenging times, especially in these challenging times, that we can all make time in our busy lives to gather in a hall like this, motivated by love. Motivated by love. Love for our country. Love for each other. Love for our planet. Fired up with full hearts, ready to do the work that is necessary to protect each other, to protect our planet, to fight for our future. And that's what this is all about. Now, my sister's going to be able to give my speech if I'm not careful, but she hit on the most important points of why we are gathered here, because of what's at stake. That we're gathered here motivated by this principle of service above self. We recognize how much and how long the government of the rich and powerful has caused so much suffering for the people. This is Katie, my friend from Hawaii. We realize how much suffering has come about because of this government of the rich and powerful. And we know our potential. We are reminded. I just read Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address again yesterday morning, and it was beautiful. I felt so inspired reading those few words, reminding us all about who we are and where we can go together. You know, in those words, he talked about the birth of a new nation on the basis of freedom and equality for all people. And he talked about the great sacrifices that were made on that battlefield, in that war, that those who gave their full measure, they paid the ultimate price, sacrificing their lives. And the best way to honor that great sacrifice for all of us, not just for them then, but for all of us, the best way to honor that great sacrifice is to ensure this new nation is led by a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Powerful words. Powerful words that light the path forward for us so we know what we must do. We know what we must do, and we also know that we are the only ones who can do it. Because when it comes right down to it, none of us are so naive as to think that we can sit on our couch at home and think that the self-serving politicians in Washington are all of a sudden going to have an epiphany and say, you know what? Yeah, we'll give up our big money special interests, PAC dollars. We'll give up the power that we have, the influence that we have, and instead really focus on how we can put the people first. It's not going to happen on its own. Why is that? Because those very few in the positions of power are afraid of losing it and will do all they can to protect it. There is nothing that can change that other than us, than we the people making sure that our voices are heard. Now we can go through some of the examples of the ramifications and the consequences of the status quo. What are the ramifications if we decide, you know what, going out and voting is hard. Going out and registering other people to vote is hard. Going out and campaigning is hard. Going out and setting your own life and your time aside to go out and do this work is hard. It can be challenging, yeah. Put your own interests aside for a time and go out and do the good work for others. You know, let's just stay home. You know what will continue to happen? We'll continue to see a broken healthcare system that rewards the rich and punishes the poor. We'll continue to see healthcare laws that are written with carve-outs and loopholes that benefit big insurance companies and big pharmaceutical companies, while people in this country are left behind. We have tens of millions of people who are either completely uninsured or underinsured, meaning they are just one healthcare emergency away from financial disaster. Tens of millions of people right now. We have people reliant on Medicare for their healthcare, for their prescription drugs, for their medicine. And yet written into our healthcare law, it says that Medicare is not allowed to negotiate lower prescription drug prices with these big pharmaceutical corporations. Not allowed by US law. The very law that is supposed to be working for us, but it's not. And how does that happen? You've got some high-powered lobbyists who are paid a hell of a lot of money to go in there and get their seat at the table to help write these laws to benefit their bosses and increase their profits while leaving the rest of us behind. But we have price gouging going on by these big pharmaceutical companies, and people are literally afraid for their lives because they can't afford the medicine they need. And here's the worst part about it all, is the United States government is the largest purchaser of prescription drugs of anyone in the world. Anyone in the world. We as taxpayers are their biggest customer. So, we have any small business owners or business owners here? We got a few of you. So if you've got a really important customer, you value them, right? You value them. You want to make sure you've got a happy customer. The purchasing power that we have as taxpayers is huge. The leverage that we have is great. Imagine if we actually use that to serve the people, to drive these prices down, rather than just writing it away and giving it away in the laws we have now. This is the consequence of the status quo. There are so many different examples that we can point to. Our broken criminal justice system and the fact that we still have private prisons that are earning profits for corporations based on a business model that keeps people in those cells, that keeps those cells full, that keeps those prisons full. Who's writing their paychecks? We are. Those dollars are coming out of our pockets. How is that helping us? How is that helping our country? How is that helping people? How is that helping to reduce the recidivism rates in this country? Actually reforming our criminal justice system. It's not. It's doing the exact opposite. Time and time again, we see examples of the laws that are being passed that are not serving the interests of the people, which is the driver for us to recognize that now is our time to bring about that change and bring about an end to the corruption in our own government. Now is the time. Now is the time. We can't afford to wait. We can't afford to wait. There are great obstacles before us because the people who continue to profit off of the status quo don't want to lose their profits or their power, and they're afraid of the voices of the people. I remember talking to one of my colleagues in Congress as over the last few years, especially in 2016, we saw more and more grassroots donors fueling campaigns, people giving $5, $10, $27 to truly have people-powered campaigns. And I went to my colleague and I said, my God, this is amazing. This is amazing to see how many people are getting involved in this process. This is true people power. And the colleague that I spoke to, he said, Tulsi, you don't understand. This is a threat to every incumbent in Washington. But he wasn't smiling when he said it. He was dead serious. And he said, this is a threat. This means that you will have more people fueled by more grassroots donors running more people power campaigns challenging the status quo, challenging the incumbents in office, threatening that power. Because most people who've been in Washington for a really long time rely on those PAC contributions and those lobbyists and those fancy receptions that they go to fund their campaigns. This person is no longer serving in Congress. But it just shows the contrast of what a people-powered campaign looks like and feels like and what we can accomplish, motivated by love as opposed to those who are motivated by fear. Fear of losing their power, fear of loss, as though that position that you hire us for defines them, that without it they are nothing. Thinking about themselves rather than those who have entrusted them with their votes and the responsibility to be their voice. This is why I'm so inspired, because whether I'm in cities like Los Angeles or small towns in a place like Ware in New Hampshire, there are people coming together, Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, coming together and saying, we stand united because we know that united we stand, divided we fall, and respecting each other as fellow Americans, drawing our strength from that appreciation that we have for the freedoms and principles that make up the bedrock of our country, provide us that space to be able to bring our ideas together, putting those principles of service above self at the forefront, caring for each other and solving problems. Actually solving problems. And this is what's possible. This is what's possible. I know there's a lot of cynicism and frustration. We were at a town hall in Iowa the other day where a young woman who probably was in her mid-20s came up to me at the end of it afterward, and she pulled me aside and she just said, Tulsi, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible to have a government of, by, and for the people. I don't think it's possible to trust that we would have a government who would, once we end these wasteful wars, then take those dollars, take the dollars that we would have otherwise continued wasting on these wars and use them to serve the people. I don't trust that they'll do that. So I think they'll go and they'll try to cut taxes, or they'll go and try to, do something else with this money and not actually use it to serve the people. And my heart hurt a little bit to hear her say that, but it just speaks to how deep the cynicism runs because our government has failed the people for so long. But what I shared with her is that, what are your options here? What are your options? Are you going to turn your back and go back into your own little safe space and pretend like none of this is going on? And continue allowing the status quo of the rich and powerful to run away with things? Or are you going to stand up and fight? Stand up and fight. Because what do we do for those we love? We fight for those we love. We protect those we love. Remembering always the example set by Dr. King. Reminding us that in times when we feel like we are surrounded by darkness, when hate and bigotry and divisiveness is on all sides, he reminds us that darkness can't drive out darkness. Who knows the words? Only light can do that. That hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Say it with me. Only love can do that. That is what makes the difference. That is what makes the difference. When we stand united, motivated by this love, we make sure that every single American in this country gets the quality care they need when they need it. When we stand united, we finally bring about an end to this failed war on drugs that has torn so many families apart, ruined people's lives. We bring about the real reforms to our criminal justice system that we need. Prison reform, sentencing reform, ending cash bail, ending private prisons. I know a lot of you have been fighting these battles right here in California and making great progress. You see the kind of change that's possible, that seems impossible at first, but when people stand up and fight for each other, change happens. We win. Exactly. Look at our environment. Unfortunately, the word climate change has become a very divisive term. Depending on what kind of room you're in, you bring this up, you'll either get cheers or you'll get boos. So let's take the rhetoric, put it aside, and just talk to each other as people. What do we care about? What is the thing that is central to our existence as humanity? Clean water. Clean water. Where's our Standing Rock people? Mini Wichoni. Water is life. Water is life. None of us can exist without it. Clean air. Clean air. Having a safe place for you, your loved ones, your children, and wanting to leave that safe and beautiful place behind for their kids and their kids and their kids to come. This is a people issue. This is a human concern. It's not a Democrat or Republican concern or progressive or conservative concern. This is a human concern. So we come together on this common ground, then we can begin to help make better choices, not only in our own lives, but better policies that will preserve that future. That's what I know we can accomplish when we come together, to make sure that we are making this transition off of fossil fuels and to build a strong, green, renewable energy future. A future where you're not forced to choose between a good-paying job and ruining our environment or no work and protecting our environment. That's a false choice. We can and must have both. There's a lot of other issues we can go down the list. Immigration reform. This is an issue that we're deeply concerned about with what's happening at the border, with our fellow veterans who are continuing to be deported out of the country that they put their lives on the line to serve. The immigration crisis that sees children taken out of the arms of their parents. There is so much more that we have in common when we look at what we are concerned about than we often realize. Our legal immigration system is broken. It's hurting our economy, hurting small businesses, farmers, families, those who are trying to be reunited with their loved ones. We lack resources at the border to be able to make sure we're providing the judges and administrators to be able to adjudicate those cases and claims for those seeking asylum in our country. The whole system is broken and it's not working for anyone. We can change that. If we get out of our little tribes and our camps where we sit and point fingers at each other and scream at each other, and instead come out and come together and actually talk about the problem and how we solve it together. There are a number of other issues that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more in the questions and answers, but you know that there's an issue that's central to the rest of these. That issue is the cost of war. The cost of war. Every veteran who's here, to ask you if you don't mind, please raise your hand or stand and just allow us to recognize you for your service. Thank you. is those who have seen the cost of war firsthand who fight hardest for peace. Those of us who said that final farewell to friends of ours, not through a hug or a pat on the back, but through a salute to empty boots, a rifle, and an empty helmet. Families at home. 4,419 families never got to say their final goodbye to their loved one who was serving in Iraq. They saw them come home in a coffin. 2,524 families never got to welcome their loved one home from Afghanistan. Tens of thousands more injured, both visible and invisible wounds, scars that they will carry with them forever. This cost of war is real. These aren't just numbers for so many of us. These are our friends, our brothers and sisters, our moms and dads, sons and daughters. We can never forget, we will never forget the price that they paid, the sacrifice that's made. The cost of war that so often goes unseen is the one paid for by every single American. Over $6 trillion taken out of our pockets since 9/11 alone. Over $6 trillion taken out of our classrooms, out of our healthcare clinics, out of our roads, bridges, out of our basic infrastructure needs. And for what? To pay for counterproductive, wasteful wars that have undermined our national security, taken American lives, and caused death and pain and destruction in the countries where we've waged these wars. Why is no one really talking about this? When this issue, where our taxpayer dollars are going, is central to every other issue that we face. Every other issue that we face. Our foreign policy and the decisions that are made are at the heart of everything else. So we talk about the cost of war and why we must end it. We can see the connection, we can connect the dots. I'm running for president to bring about an end to these wasteful wars. To end these wasteful wars, this new Cold War we're in with ever-escalating tensions between the United States and nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China, this arms race that is ensuing, getting worse because of things like Trump tearing up the INF Treaty, negotiated over 30 years ago between Reagan and Gorbachev, a thing back then that the pundits in Washington said was impossible. This was an impossible agreement. Why did they do it? These two guys who were supposedly rivals and adversaries came together, negotiated this historic treaty for the sake of peace and the safety of their people, all of their people. Instead of actually recognizing there were some challenges with the treaty and doing the work that a leader does in strengthening it, Trump tore it up, threw it in the trash, walked away, and then immediately started telling big defense contractors, go ahead, we're gonna pay you millions of dollars to build more missiles that were banned under that treaty because we're in an arms race now and we've gotta win. But guess what? There is no winning in this. There is no winning in this race. there is only a loss of safety and security, not only for the American people, but for the world. The only ones who are laughing their way to the bank is the military-industrial complex that's building more of these bombs. So when we talk about what's at stake, we really are talking about our future, because these are existential threats that we're facing. With these increasing threats, nuclear strategists are talking about we're closer to the brink of nuclear catastrophe than we ever have been before. This is real. We're not here to play games. We are fighting for our lives and fighting for our planet and fighting for our future. That is why we will never quit. We're not going home. We're just getting started. We are just getting started. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Some of you have asked questions about the debates. Debates or no debates, we are driving on. Let me tell you why, because we know that it is we the people who decide who gets to lead our country. They forget that sometimes. And they think, actually, you know what? People aren't really paying attention, they don't really care, so hey, let's just winnow down the number of people who we think you should be able to choose from. Let these people in Washington, they have your best interests at heart, right? No. We're not playing that game anymore. We're not playing those games. They didn't get the memo. That's all right. We're driving on. So March 3rd is a really big day here in California. March 3rd is your Democratic primary. It is earlier this year than it ever has been before, which means you have a unique ability to help impact the momentum and message that you send to the country. So what I'm really trying to say is, y'all got a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. You have a big state with proportional delegates. It's no winner take all. So with your support, I know we can do very well here in California. With your support, our movement can build and continue to grow. And it is with this movement that is about bringing people together, putting the interest and the well-being of the people in our country and our planet at the forefront of the decisions our leaders make, bringing about a government of, by, and for the people that will allow us to truly bend the arc of history away from war and towards a bright future with peace, opportunity, prosperity, and equality for all people. That's what it's all about. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here, for joining me in this movement. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I love you guys. Shoulder to shoulder with you in this fight for our people, our planet, and our future. Thank you so much. We're going to have time for a few questions here. You feeling the time change here a little bit before I came out. You guys got me all pumped up. You got me fired up. Thank you. Yes, sir. We'll start with you.
Hi Tulsi. It's nice to see you here tonight. My name is Charles. I'm from Los Angeles, and my family actually is gay from communist China. And right now, I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends on the ground in Hong Kong, hoping they could have the same Second Amendment rights to protect themselves against a tyrannical government. So I guess my question is, as president, will you join the rest of the Democrats to support this gun control, or will you stand up for citizens' Second Amendment rights and their right to choose the method of self-protection? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. This is an issue that unfortunately is one of the biggest ones that's tearing our country apart. But it doesn't have to. You know, right now you have two extremes, people in two different camps, generally. On the one hand, you guys hear me okay? On the one hand, you have one extreme saying there should be no restrictions whatsoever to those Second Amendment rights. There's no restrictions about who is able to own a gun in this country and who's not. And on the other hand, you have people who want to see the Second Amendment go away altogether and want to see guns banned in this country. But the vast majority of people in America, I believe, understand and uphold the Second Amendment while also desiring sensible gun safety laws in our land to make sure that these guns are not getting into the hands of those who seek to do harm to others. Now, a few months ago in Congress, we passed a bill, H.R. 8, that would make sure you have universal background checks. There are other bills that we've passed that have to do with closing the loophole in our laws that allowed the Charleston shooter to massacre people as they gathered in their place of worship. We've passed some of these bills that I believe are common sense pieces of gun safety legislation that uphold our Second Amendment rights while again making sure that those who would inflict this devastating harm and murder on others are not allowed to do so. Now these bills are sitting in the Senate right now. It's up to the Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, to bring those bills to the floor of the Senate for a vote, but he won't even do that. I think it says a lot about leaders who refuse to allow the members of that body to represent their constituents and exercise their right to vote. What are they afraid of? Being held accountable? Being on the record? They're failing to do their job when they're not allowing the people's voices to be heard. Now, I think there's a deeper issue here because even with the numbers of these massacres and these shootings continuing to increase, we see them in the headlines and we mourn and grieve with the families who have lost their loved ones. Sadly, there are families every single day in our country, in cities like Chicago and others, who are losing their children, who are losing their loved ones to gun violence. But their names aren't ever heard on the news. So there are illegal guns, gang violence, crime. There are other things that are happening here that we need to address. Passing some of these gun safety laws are important, but it's not going to solve the bigger challenge that we have. And there are a lot of things that are driving this. We together as a country need to recognize this is not about us versus them, but it's about us coming together as people and standing up for our lives. being able to move forward together as a result.
I want to thank you for mentioning Abraham Lincoln, because America's moral obligation to our veterans must be more genuine. Here in West Los Angeles, we have the biggest and the busiest of the VA homes. I'm sure you know about it. And I'm sure you probably heard about the land grab issue that's been debated there. Senator Isaacson and Senator Tester called for a voice vote to amend the West Los Angeles Leasing Act that was supposed to fix that, and by adding one word, new. And by adding that word new, they grandfathered in some of the, they said so they could save the deals to our leadership that wasn't aware, but the deals they were saving were the good old boys club that exists there. And we have exposed a lot of things in the challenge of that land grab. We feel that if we can begin to genuinely care for the veterans, the 4,000 homeless veterans that are in California alone, we can begin to model that for the larger population solution for homelessness. We need your support in this, and we need a champion, and we believe in you.
I have your back. We'll do whatever I can to be able to help you in this ongoing specific challenge, but in the greater challenges that you're raising. That we are still seeing around 20 of our brothers and sisters in uniform take their own lives every day. It is an epidemic that too often goes unnoticed, but deals directly with the fact that there are barriers to care that's getting in the way of these friends of ours getting the help that they need. During my second deployment, I was a platoon leader. And years after coming home, one of my soldiers, a happy-go-lucky sergeant, who was always there when you needed him, who always got the job done, fell victim to this epidemic and took his own life. This is still happening because they're not getting the help that they need. We still have homeless veterans in communities all across this country who aren't getting the services that they have earned. Our brothers and sisters are being left behind because of politicians who give them lip service on Veterans Day, who like to come and shake our hands and say thank you for your service, but then turn around and shortchange our veterans through a lack of resources going to the programs that actually work. Instead, seeing a lot of taxpayer dollars being wasted in this bureaucracy that too often serves itself rather than serving our veterans. And these politicians who don't think twice about continuing to make more veterans by pushing for more of these wasteful, counterproductive wars. Dishonoring the service and the sacrifice, the choice that's made by veterans to put their lives on the line for our country, by sending them on missions that are not worthy of their sacrifice.
In regards to all the outstanding debt that is buried under, and in other areas of need in Puerto Rico.
And there are many, unfortunately. I was grateful to have been able to be there for a couple of days to join Puerto Rican people from all across the island, people who came from all parts of the world to stand up against corruption. And to bring voice for the people. Because they saw there how their government was not working for them, and they decided to do something about it. And I just gotta tell you, for those of you who saw little clips on the evening news about this, you probably saw, and this happened actually while I was there, I did a live interview, and while I was talking, my sister was in the other room, and I was talking about how people from all walks of life were coming together, joyfully, celebrating, playing music, dancing, calling for the resignation of a corrupt governor. But while I was talking about this, they were showing B-roll footage of tear gas and rioters and people who were in dark masks and painting this picture that was so far from reality. It just shows what's wrong with our media. They're not telling the truth, right? And the beautiful thing that we saw there in Old San Juan was very early in the morning. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. Yes, there were some people, some bad apples there who were trying to cause trouble. But what we also saw were people who were coming out and painting over graffiti, protesters sweeping the streets, picking up the trash, cleaning up Old San Juan, because they love their home and they love their town. The key to our bringing about the kind of change to address the corruption in government that has gotten in the way of federal aid getting to the people who need it, and that has stood in the way of being able to help bring about the kind of recovery reform to deal with the crushing debt that Puerto Rico is dealing with, has come from that corruption. Rooting out that corruption is first and foremost. And for the federal government, standing with the people of Puerto Rico as fellow Americans, hand in hand to move forward to a new beginning. The challenge there is complex. There's no simple, easy answer to it. It's going to take big change in Puerto Rico, and it's going to take support from the federal government to be able to do it. My commitment to the people of Puerto Rico is the same as my commitment to every American in this country to continue to fight for you.
What you said in the second debates, because there were several times where I had to jump up and I can't believe the things that you have the guts to say. GMO foods, because we deal with it every week when we're at the market. But I don't know if you know, but there's 28 European countries and 4 Asian countries and Russia. They've all banned genetically modified foods and synthetic sweeteners like aspartame and stevia, because they believe that they cause cancer. But you don't hear about it here, and it's hard to find food here that doesn't have GMOs in it. So I just want to know where you stand on that, or if you have.
Thank you. This is a really important question, one that we've been battling for a long time. To your first point, isn't it sad that it becomes an act of bravery to tell the truth? We need more of it. GMOs in Congress, there was a bill called the DARK Act a couple of years ago. It's actually under the previous administration. That's what we called it. It's not the name that was on the bill, but the real goal of the bill was to keep the American people in the dark about the kinds of GMOs and other things that are in the food that we eat. Now, this bill was marketed as a transparency bill, as a labeling bill, but it was everything but that. It was basically a bill encouraging big corporations to mark the food as a voluntary act, but if they felt like letting us know what was in it, they could. I've introduced and supported legislation year after year that would do exactly the opposite of that, to make sure that we have mandatory labeling that's making it clear so we know and can make informed choices about the food that we eat. And as president, I would get the corruption out of the Food and Drug Administration. As the agency that continues to block the banning of foods that so many other countries have already banned and that they've proven to be harmful. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of examples of this as reports come out. More people get sick and they're tracing these things back to substances and things that are found in the food that we eat every day and that we feed to our kids. How did we start this conversation? The consequences of the rich and powerful. This is yet another example of how deep the corruption runs and where we need to make that change. This also comes in how we pass the Farm Bill, what kinds of subsidies are going to what kind of corporations. We've got to stop subsidizing companies like Monsanto and Syngenta, these multinational agribusiness corporations. They don't give a shit about our soil. They don't care about the quality of food that we eat. They're in this for their bottom line and their profits. Instead, we should say, let our money talk. Let's support our small farmers. Let's support those who are farming sustainably. Let's support those who are pushing for regenerative farming, who are able to grow food and regenerate the beauty and the strength of our soil, making sure that it's there to serve us for generations to come. Take one in the back there. Yes, sir, the white shirt.
Tulsi, thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for taking down Kamala Harris in that debate. All right. So, I'm a teacher here in Los Angeles.
Thank you.
High school teacher, so back to the Second Amendment question, school shootings, of course, I'm not, desensitized to that at all. I showed up, there was a threat at my school one day, and a lot of teachers showed up, some actually didn't, but most of us were there. It's scary. And it's not just in schools, of course. We saw what happened in Texas recently, etc. But even though I agree with pretty much everything you said over here to this gentleman, I think the question of assault weapons is what bothers me the most. Because, well, wait a minute, you might not be on my side here. A lot of people don't know a lot of people think AR and AR-15 stands for assault rifle, and it's not. Right? It's Armalite Rifle, the company that designed it way back. Okay? A lot of people don't know what semi-automatic means. They hear semi-automatic and they think that's a dangerous weapon. Semi-automatic is like a revolver, one pull, one shot. Right? The bans that we're seeing here in California especially, you can't have, it's an assault rifle according to the politicians here in California, if it has a pistol grip. Right? If it has an adjustable stock. If it has an adjustable stock, it makes the firearm safer to use. If it has a pistol grip, it's safer to use and hold, as you know, of course. But most people don't, right? So, since I recently learned that you are in favor of a ban on quote-unquote assault weapons, knowing that there are other rifles such as the Mini-14. The Mini-14 is also a .223 caliber, just like the AR-15. Right? But when you find them, you typically find them in wood frame, and they're all mostly wood. But the AR-15, you typically see them all black, with the adjustable stock, and they look like scary weapons when they're just rifles. And just because a mass shooter or multiple mass shooters choose to use that weapon doesn't mean that they won't use another one like the Mini-14. The Virginia Tech shooter used pistols, right? So what can you tell me or us about this faux scare thing about assault weapons? They're just the rifles.
What we've seen in some of the shootings that we've had, and I understand your point, and some of your points I agree with, but I do support the assault weapons ban legislation that we had in Congress. Guns that can very easily be turned into with the high capacity magazines and other adjustments that are often made that allow for more loss of life in a very short period of time. I think that when we look at some of I don't know the details of California's laws, and I'd be happy to look into that, but ultimately, I think we've seen how some of these laws don't actually help achieve the objective that we're seeking to achieve, which is protecting lives. And I think that's where, as we look at the details of the legislation that we're pushing, how we can accomplish that, taking away the divisive rhetoric, then we can actually make progress. Now, you and I may differ on this issue. I think that there are other guns, as you said, that can also be adjusted. We've got to look at each of those circumstances, once again, to make sure that we do what we can to protect human life without undermining and eroding our Second Amendment. I think there's a way forward for this, I really do. Yes, ma'am. Your last question.
Now, we're the savior of the world. That is our job, to go protect others and to go spread the seeds of democracy, which is exactly the reason that has been used to intervene and invade other countries. With your beautiful anti-war policy, beyond monetary reasons that you're proposing, how are you going to address the higher moral ground void that it's going to create in the American people, especially because it might create a weaker image of the US compared to the other world leaders?
Thank you for your question. I disagree with the premise of your question. I think that the world right now does not have the best image of the United States because we go around the world trying to act as the world's police. Trying to bully other countries into submission rather than being the force for good that we can and should be in the world. We can best represent and share the ideals of democracy with the world, not by going and forcing them on other people in other countries, not by disrespecting the sovereignty of those other countries, but by actually making our democracy as strong as it can be. And doing the work and making the change we need to strive towards that more perfect union here at home. It is wrong to think that by ending wasteful regime change wars, by stopping this world's police activity of overthrowing authoritarian dictators, that somehow that means we turn our back on the world and there is a void that someone else will fill. This is the argument that's made by the establishment when they tell us that we've got to continue to have troops deployed in every country in the world, just about, that there will be a void otherwise. How about we fill that void with something other than war? And this is what is at the heart of my foreign policy. We don't turn our back on the world. We be the leader that we should be, leading with a foreign policy based on cooperation rather than conflict, being able to work out our differences with other countries, whether they be in trade or otherwise, security, other differences that we have, while also creating that space to work towards common shared goals. You just had a whole, was it 7 hours of a climate change forum on CNN the other day. A lot of people talking about climate change. But a lot of the very same people expressing concern about climate change are fanning the flames of this new Cold War, ratcheting up tensions with other countries, like Russia and China. When really we've got to be able to work with these countries to address climate change. Because as you know, even if we do every single thing that we must, everything that we want to do, if we snapped our fingers and got it all done tomorrow, it wouldn't even come close to addressing the global crisis that's before us. Leading with the foreign policy of cooperation rather than conflict provides us that opportunity, understanding that we don't have to see the world through a win-lose proposition. It is not a zero-sum game. That in order for us to win, in order for the American people to do well, that doesn't mean everybody else has to lose. No. We are stronger when we stand together. When others are prosperous and we are prosperous, we are stronger as a society in this world. There is so much opportunity. There is so much good and so much potential, and we here in the United States are uniquely equipped to lead the way towards that brighter future. That is what I hope to do as your President and Commander-in-Chief.
The boss said we're doing a selfie line, so we're doing a selfie line. But we're already late, so no questions, just a quick photo so we can get everybody in.
Don't rush. Stay where you are. Hold on. Listen, please. We're gonna have 2 lines, okay? One on this side, one on that side against the wall. So if you want a picture, start lining up against the line and we'll get you on stage. Have your phones ready and camera